Perfect. Well, hello everyone. My name is Tess Dunn and I am so honored that you are here to listen to me talk about myself and my work. We'll start with a little bit about me and why I'm able to talk to you about getting started in copywriting. I just want to specify that this is for those who are in the very beginning stage. I'll be right back. The other cat's meowing now.
No issues.
Am I good to go?
Yeah, you're good to go. Just
Perfect. So, hi everyone, my name is Tess Dunn and it is a privilege to speak to you today. I'm a freelance copywriter from Santa Cruz, California. So, let's start this off with my picture on the PowerPoint slide. This is why I'm able to talk to you about copywriting. This is for those who are in the very beginning stage of their career and maybe don't know very much about copywriting. And I just want to say this is based on my experience, not everyone's experience. So I originally started out as a singer-songwriter. I was 12 when I began writing my own lyrics. Over the past 11 years, I released 5 EPs under my actual name and my pseudonym, with all songs and therefore lyrics written by me. My most recent album came out last year, and I am currently working on my next one. I've played the Vans Warped Tour, which is an alternative music festival, and I was on Vans Pass the Bucket series in 2012. So let's take it back a little bit. In high school, I was that weird kid who loved reading ahead and writing essays. So when I went off to college, it was a no-brainer. I wanted to study creative writing. From lyrics to assignments, I was all in for it. So my college career was a bit odd. I went to 3 colleges with 3 different majors. I started off at a state college with plans of majoring in human communication with an emphasis in writing. I then transferred to a college to study audio engineering. As I said, I am a musician. But eventually I ended up attending Sonoma State University, where I graduated with a degree in English with an emphasis in creative writing. As you can tell, 3 schools later, I finally did it. I had 3 internships during my time at Sonoma, and my final internship turned into a full-time job once I graduated. Since that job, I've worked as a content editor, associate producer, editorial director, and now a freelance copywriter. Again, I'm honored. I do want to say that if there were 6 copywriters here, we would all have different experiences and different stories. So this is mine, and I am so excited to share it with you. So before we really get into it, you may be wondering, what is copywriting? You hear writing, creative writing, copywriting. So according to Wikipedia, which yes, is never the best source, but I'm using it anyway for its definition, copywriting is the act or occupation of writing text for the purpose of advertising and other forms of marketing. Copywriters help create billboards, brochures, jingle lyrics, magazine and newspaper ads, and so on. But how did I get there? You know, jump from writing essays in high school to going to 3 colleges to getting these jobs. So that's what I'm here to do. I'll share some tips with you. First, we're going to start with content creation. This is where you write video scripts, newsletters, blog posts, pretty much everything that copywriting doesn't cover. So that might sound backward to start with something that's not what we're talking about, but I swear it all connects. So with that, first of all, try writing about all topics. It sounds like a lot, but I started with songwriting. I thought I was going to be a professional singer or a poet. I didn't know that there were more facets of writing out there. So one great way to expand your horizons is to search for things to write about. No one has to read it. No one even has to know that you're doing it, but explore each topic. Conduct in-depth research, find sources, read interviews with experts. If you've ever written an essay, you're basically doing that. But essays are boring, you may say. And I would probably agree with you now, but don't tell my college professors that. But here's why you should practice writing about everything. When I was at Sonoma State, I joined their Her Campus chapter, a website for women in college. I was free to write about whatever I wanted, so I chose to write about women's health and relationships, things I had never written about before, but always wanted to. This led to me submitting a piece to the website Thought Catalog, a publication that I had read personal blogs on for 4 years. My piece was accepted and had 20,000 views within the first 2 weeks, and I was invited to write for them on a regular basis. Had I not explored what interested me but was challenging, I would not have had the bravery to write for them more often. While it was unpaid, it was useful to have a writing sample for future job applications. The fun thing about this whole writing thing is that it doesn't have to be perfectly well written or fancy suit and tie professional. It can be a stream of consciousness with random thoughts here and there. Unless it's your job, you get to explore how you write and how you research. 2, hone in on your favorite topics. So once you've explored a variety of subjects, you'll undoubtedly have a few that stick out to you and that you prefer, and that is perfect. So now you can dig into it more. This will be less overwhelming and more fun than when you were first exploring every topic because it's something that actually interests you. You want to know more about it. You'll do the same thing you did before. Read all about it, see what the experts say, basically compile all of this information. From there, you can think up different articles that interest you and then pull from the research you had done previously. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. This is still your learning stage. After you've written a few unofficial articles, sleep on them, then come back and try to edit them. Educate yourself on any aspects of grammar you're not sure of. The 3 theirs, there, your versus your, everyday versus everyday, a part versus a part. These are key for when you're sharing a portfolio of your work to potential employers. These details can be hard to remember, I know, so I recommend sending your article to someone who has a strong grasp of the language you're writing in. You may know the rules perfectly and what you're thinking and therefore meaning, so you don't see the errors when you write them, but others will. And if you don't have someone willing to edit it, there are plenty of websites that can help, as well as the extension Grammarly, which helps with spelling and grammar, as evidenced by its name. As a musician, I loved reading articles and finding new artists to listen to. And this pushed me to apply for an internship at Indie Band Guru during my junior year. More on internships later. All right, find a mentor. I never found this to be important until it actually happened to me, so I can't speak highly enough about it. In college, I found a teacher whom I absolutely adored. She was smart, creative, and a solid soundboard for advice when it came to writing. I ended up taking a directed writing course with her, which was basically a one-on-one course where she helped me during my internship with a newspaper. She gave suggestions, helped with word count, and generally believed in me. And she was a strong, successful woman, and I grew to believe in myself and my abilities thanks to her. When I started at Smart Meetings, an event planning site, I was quickly taken under the content chief's wing. She taught me to be unapologetic, steadfast in my beliefs, open-minded, and how to generally run the editorial side of a company. When I joined Girls Behind the Rock Show, I followed her lead, thus amounting to my editorial director position. More on that later as well. Mentors can provide guidance when you need it and support you in your endeavors. You can find mentors in a variety of ways through work, family, friends, school, forums, anywhere really if you really want to find someone. And therefore you'll receive support you may not otherwise have. 4, build your portfolio. This is where the fun begins. A portfolio of writing is basically a website with articles you've written. When you're first getting started, you probably won't have any published articles, and that is totally okay. If this is the case, I would find a platform like WordPress and create a blog with the writing you've done. These should be the articles you've worked on and edited. They don't have to be super fancy, but they should demonstrate your writing abilities. I made the mistake of not putting one together until my senior year of college. I highly recommend doing this once you start out. I got lucky and nabbed internships, but I still wish that I had created a portfolio earlier and had been better prepared, so don't make my mistake. Okay, so we have the basics of content creation. Now, what does this have to do with copywriting? And here's an example of portfolios, by the way. So here's the thing. You can't be a copywriter without being a content creator. Even though you may not be writing blog posts as a copywriter, you still need the chops because you never know when you'll need to write something that requires experience in content writing. Writers must be versatile. Reflect back to point number 1. Think about it this way. You've accepted a painting job. They say you'll only be painting with black and white. Easy, you think? I've been working with black and white my whole life. Well, one day they need someone to paint with the color green because the green painter is gone. And you're their only other option. So by having experience in something outside of black and white, you've become more valuable to the company. Apply that to copywriting. You're needing to write content for a client's website. You're only assigned to write the section on food sustainability because that's your strong suit. But wait, their landing page needs work too, and it's on green energy. You'll be prepared to switch modes and work on that aspect of the site because you have the practice under your belt. Even if you've never touched upon green energy, you have the skills. Research, consult the experts, and write. An example of this. When I started at the newspaper, the head of the news section was out. With one weekend, I had to write a long-form article. I had never written anything this long before, and I knew nothing about the subject. I was a total fish out of water, but I pushed myself to work hard and take it as a challenge, and that resulted in great appreciation from the editor-in-chief. And this article, Dirty Water, about the pollution of the Russian River in California. So now that we've talked about copywriting, how do you get your first job? Congratulations, you've got copywriting down. So now we're looking to the next stage of your copywriting career. So the first tip I have, clean up your portfolio. Before applying, go through your portfolio and really look at each article that's on there. Are there any that aren't as strong as the rest? Either remove them or delete them. Don't delete anything that seems irrelevant to the types of jobs you're looking for because, like I said before, the more versatility, the better. 2, create a resume. So a portfolio isn't the only thing you need. Your resume needs to be clean too. While you may not have writing jobs, previous experience can have transferable skills. For example, you worked in a kitchen. What relevance does that have to copywriting? Well, it requires communication between all employees. That's a transferable skill. Did you do well in the fast-paced environment and under pressure? List that. Were you organized? List that as well. While working in a kitchen seems completely unrelated to copywriting, it actually results in skills that can give you an edge over other applicants. Personally, I originally had my resume laid out with the summary of what I was looking for, my work history with bullet points for my responsibilities, and my education. However, I wasn't getting any bites. I had the skills, but I just wasn't being noticed. So I completely revamped my resume. Rather than list what I did, I listed what I accomplished in that role. For example, at Smart Meetings, I wrote almost 150 articles. Instead of saying wrote articles about a variety of topics, I wrote out my accomplishments, such as writing those 150 articles and helping the senior content editor with magazine inserts. I also added a photo of myself and links to all of my social media. I also added buzzwords relevant to each job I had, as well as soft skills such as adaptability and leadership. By tweaking my resume and adding my accomplishments, I've successfully made it past AI and ended up interviewing for multiple jobs. The takeaway here is to humble brag, find keywords, list hard and soft skills, and it never hurts to add a picture of your smiling face. 3, master the cover letter. I'm going to be honest, the cover letter is my least favorite part of applying to jobs, and I've been writing them for 4 or 5 years at this point. But cover letters are what truly sell you to your future employer. First, list why you want to apply to the job. Do your values align with the company's? What about their mission excites you? You want to make it clear that you're passionate about this job specifically. There are many ways to structure it, but make sure it's captivating. And I have 3 examples here that you can see, some templates. Then list your accomplishments and skills. If you've only written what you did in your resume without the skills, now is the time to highlight those skills. You don't want to boast like they're ridiculous for choosing someone else, but you do want to emphasize why you're the perfect fit for the position. Finally, you'll want to sum up your skills, your passion, and your belief that you are the copywriter they are looking for. You do not want to seem like you're sending this cover letter to multiple places. Even if you are, tailor each cover letter to each separate job. In 2019, I applied to Girls Behind the Rock show as a content editor. I was hired quickly, and I realized almost immediately that there was no editorial output. I began helping with marketing materials, sponsorship decks, and also writing blog posts here and there. Within 4 months of working with our writers and other departments, I was promoted to editorial director. I worked there until June of this year. I was chosen because I had the capability of writing content while also copywriting their material. Had I not had that experience, I would not have been given the opportunity to be promoted. Again, versatility is important. So now we move on to internships, since I talked about how I had 3. So basically, you've done all the above. You've made your portfolio, you've put together your resume, you've written a really good cover letter. So where should you apply? When I was in college, I was a music writing intern for Indie Band Guru in New York City. I didn't have any experience with writing other than my piece on Thought Catalog, but my passion came through, luckily. Following that, I was an intern at the local newspaper. I had writing samples. Again, no portfolio, please. I cannot emphasize how much you should not make that mistake. And then after my internship at the newspaper, I entered at an event planning and travel company, Smart Meetings, which eventually turned into the full-time job straight out of college. A fun little picture for us all. My point, internships can be where it's at, especially if you're writing on the side or just starting out. Some will pay, some will not. And if you go with one that is unpaid, that's totally fine. Everyone has to start somewhere. Her campus, Indie Band Guru, and the newspaper job were all unpaid. While this was fine as they were part-time and I was in college, you are never too old to take on an internship. Just ask Robert De Niro. Internships are also great to see if you like the topic or not. Even though you may have written about the topic the internship surrounds, there's a difference between writing your own piece and copywriting, as we discussed earlier. You may find you don't like writing white papers about hotels or advertisements for the product. And if that's the case, that's totally okay. The whole point is to see what works for you. My internship at the newspaper taught me that I didn't want to be a journalist that works for newspapers. The timing was stressful and I wasn't always passionate about the topics I was writing about, as they ranged from food to local issues to local icons. I learned a lot though. I loved writing about a musician who made designs for guitars, which taught me how to interview someone thoroughly and write a long form article. I now write for an edible cookie dough company, Doughp, and a site that aims to educate those on how to run nonprofits, DonorBox. Now, anyone can write short form pieces about cookie dough because it's cookie dough and cookie dough is amazing and delicious and it's everyone's passion. But DonorBox was a jump into the deep end for me. I grew up with a social worker for a mother who has and continues to run nonprofits, but I'm not an MSW, I'm not a social worker, I'm not a lawyer. So writing pieces about the difference between 501c3s and 501c4s, confusing. But the newspaper taught me how to write long form subjects I know nothing about, and it pays. So now you've moved past the internships and you're gonna find a job. If you're lucky and have writing chops, like I said, a great resume, beautiful and full portfolio, cool cover letter, you absolutely have a chance of getting a job, especially if you are past internships or just can't afford to have one on the side. Before you begin applying to every job, consider what you want to do, read job descriptions, and research the companies you're applying for. If you don't feel excited about what the companies do or don't align with their values or simply don't want to take it, that's fine. Move on to the next, and eventually you'll find what you want to do. When you're out of a job, it might be tempting to mass apply, understandably. Sometimes you'll have to take on a job you don't necessarily want. This is when it's important to compromise. Keep applying to jobs that interest you, but also to those you're capable of writing about. And sometimes you might become even more interested than you thought you would. I am an example of this. When I was first accepted as a copywriting intern for Smart Meetings, I actually almost didn't take it. I didn't necessarily care about the hospitality industry, nor did I really know anything about it, and the job description was super vague. So I told myself I would work for the 8 weeks required, it was paid, and then I'd move on and apply for more internships and jobs since I was graduating that semester. However, I ended up falling in love with writing about event planning and travel. On top of those subjects, I got to touch upon food, technology, social media, and career moves. I was allowed to pitch ideas, be creative, and I thrived in the fast-paced environment. I ended up putting in another 8 weeks and then accepting the job offer at the end of my internship and school year. And I ended up writing for them for a year and a half. Writing for the website, landing pages, email campaigns, white papers, video scripts on all of these different topics brought me immense fulfillment. Keep this in mind when considering a job you don't necessarily envision yourself in. Sometimes the people and morals are enough to draw you in and keep you there, and then convince you that this work was what you'd always wanted to do. Passion is very important. Okay, so sometimes you don't love the job. I already said keep applying, and I meant it. When I was out of a job, I ended up working for a nonprofit. I won't say what company it was, but they had to do with having dogs and traveling with them. Now, I'm a cat person. That is my cat at Christmas. I am in love. But I thought, okay, I can do this. I'm a writer. And I needed to in order to afford rent and utilities and my cat's dental cleanings. Again, cat person. But I'll admit it, I wasn't happy and I didn't fall in love with it. So I continued applying to jobs that did interest me. I dedicated myself to the work and then put in hours applying to jobs I did want after I had clocked out. Eventually, I landed the jobs I have now. These are fulfilling and fun, and I would have never found them had I simply resigned myself to the dog travel job. Finally, have fun. Duh, you want to have fun in what you're doing. Copywriting can be hard and tedious and frustrating, but to see your work come to fruition is more rewarding than I can express. When you're having fun, it hardly feels like work, as I'm sure many of you know. Writing isn't meant to be a chore, so those essays, they pay off. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Tess. So I'm going to wait for people to post questions on chat. So meanwhile, I have a couple of questions, so I'll get started with those questions, and then we will let people ask the questions in chat. So the first question for you is, see, I think most of us are developers here, like, people are developers / technical people, right? So who write code and things like that. But one of the important thing is, like, at the end of the day, we have to communicate certain things to the user. Obviously, if it's like a full landing page and other things, maybe we could actually go to a content writer or a copywriter, right? But there are certain things that we might have to do, like, for instance, showing an error message to the user, or like, having a CTA button, like the text for a CTA button and things like that. So what would you recommend for people who are not traditionally copywriters, or people who don't have much experience with writing, but if they have to do certain things, I mean, if they have to do certain things related to that, right? What would you recommend?
So if you're not a traditional copywriter, I say that loosely because I think everyone does some part of copywriting at least once in their life. I think that the best way to approach that is to use your connections. Like you said, most of you are more technical people, but guaranteed someone on the team knows a lot about the language you're writing in and the technological language, the technical writing you're doing. So I would say reach out, use your connections in order to create the best copy you can. Again, someone will know because everyone has an inner writer and some people harness it. If that's not the case, I definitely recommend, I mentioned Grammarly, which is a great site that helps with grammar and spelling. So if that's what you're looking for, great extension. But generally the way I've always done it is to go to someone, a colleague of mine or a mentor or someone, to ask them how they would approach the error message or whatever you're writing.
Okay. And like adding on to the same question, right? In case if like, technical people like us, right? I mean, we don't want to become full-fledged content writers, but at the same time, we have to get to a stage where we could navigate around these things, right? Like, especially as I said, like, making sure that uh, whatever things that we are trying to communicate either to the client, either to the end user through our UI interface and other things, right?
Right.
What would you recommend for people like us to get started with?
I mean, here's what I think. Everyone can write, whether they think they're a writer or not. Everyone is a writer. We all learned our languages when we were younger. So I think some people doubt themselves because they don't consider themselves writers, when in reality they are very well spoken and translate to writing. So I think, first of all, I want to reinstate that into everyone who's watching this. You're all writers, no matter what you think. If you're not wanting to go full on into content writing, there are definitely ways you can research the specific technical aspect you're wanting to write about. There are plenty of online classes, but even if you don't have that, I mean, I have learned so much just by searching through YouTube how to write things, which sounds funny because I went to 3 colleges, but there are ways. There's also an amazing website I use called Skillshare, and they have a bunch of talks on writing, which is very useful, and I've used it multiple times.
Okay, cool. So we have now got a couple of questions in chat. So I'll probably read them so that it gets recorded properly.
Right.
So the first question is, like, would you recommend using online tools would you recommend us using like online tools for copywriting, especially like Grammarly? That's something that you mentioned. But like in general, like, would you recommend us using these tools?
I think that they are extremely useful. I have used Grammarly. That's why I brought it up, especially in the beginning when I was still developing my knowledge of correct copywriting. It helped me figure out how to phrase things properly and rewrite run-on sentences and edit words that I'm maybe not using. I mean, for example, the other day I was like, niche. How do you spell that? And it helped me out. And honestly, online is a great way to find things that you need. If you have the internet available to you, there are countless ways to use it in order to get what you need from it. So highly recommend Grammarly, highly recommend Skillshare, highly recommend really any research you do.
Okay, cool. So the next question is, on what degree a copywriter differs from a content writer? And basically, like, if someone has to move from content writing to copywriting, right? What are the additional skills that they might have to learn, which would be handy for them?
That is a great question. So when I started off as a content writer, it was easy for me to write blog posts about things. And that's kind of what I'm doing with Doughp right now, is writing about mental health and baking, and because it's cookie dough. But when it comes to copywriting is more about advertisements and helping to showcase products and brands. And with that, you need to develop an advertisement savvy knowledge thing. um, you have to understand the language of advertisements, snappy headlines, eye-catching graphics. Even if you're a copywriter, you need to be thinking about, a copywriter, you need to be thinking about these things. Whereas content writing is more pitching ideas, thinking freely, coming up with points for listicles, that kind of thing. So in terms of skills you need to develop, I think most come from content writing, but then you really have to take into consideration what part of copywriting you're doing. I mean, like I mentioned, are you doing jingle lyrics? Are you doing an email campaign with a call to action? So you have to look at each one individually, and those will have their own necessities. But in general, I think if you are a content writer, you have a solid foundation, and it is fairly not easy, but natural to ease your way into a copywriter's role.
Okay, perfect. So the next question is, can you briefly talk about what are the preparation process and the research process that you go through before actually writing about something, right? In case if you have to write about something, what are the steps that you take, like the preparation steps or the research steps that you take, and can you briefly
So,
talk about that?
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, sorry. I was just saying, basically, the question was can you briefly talk about the preparation steps?
Got it. Yeah, so here, I'll give you an example. I recently wrote a piece on 7 ways to show volunteer appreciation within nonprofits. And 7 was the number I was given, so I had to figure out, okay, I could either write 7 big things or collect multiple things. So the first thing I did was research people who have written on this topic before, not just one blog stealing from them, but you have to know how to use the right keywords, first of all, the right search terms. So what you'll use are buzzwords. So volunteer appreciation ideas, that's a buzzword. That's the keyword. That's what search engine optimization, SEO, is looking for. So looking up that, reading articles, coming up with examples, that's generally where I start. And then you get into the more creative mindset of, well, how can I apply this differently? How can I create a different example? So that's more content writing. Copywriting wise, for smart meetings, I helped write their landing page on Earth Day, for example. Same thing, you need to do your research, look at multiple pages. For that, it was more research. When was Earth Day started? Who started it? That kind of thing. But honestly, that's why I keep saying in my speech, research, 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 because that's the foundation of writing both content and copy.
Okay, that's good to know. Thanks for sharing that. So the next question is from Dhruv. So he's asking, can you give us some tips on blog writing, especially people who blog about a lot of stuff, right? What would be some of your tips for people who are getting started with writing blogs?
Ooh, tips. That's a good question. 1, research. 1 is research. But 2 is going to be finding what you really want to write about. I mean, I mentioned niche earlier as a joke, but finding your niche is a very important part of writing. Like I said, some things that you're writing about, when you look at every topic out there, will stick out to you. Find that is going to be your niche, and that is going to be what you are strongest writing about, because we are all best at doing the things we're passionate about and want to do rather than what we're supposed to do. So, and if we're lucky, what we're supposed to do is what we want to do, and that's the goal when you're doing content writing and starting out. So I would say number one, research. Number two, find out what really sticks out to you. Number three, practice. You want to, I mean, that's why I said write practice articles. Even if they're not good and you're not editing them and you're just typing and typing and typing, that's a great place to start, because stream of consciousness is where everything happens initially. And then I would say number four is to edit. That is a big thing. That is how you will provide emphasis on certain parts, or know where to bold something or italicize something. You'll know where to put commas and periods. And again, that's another great thing with Skillshare and Grammarly. They teach you about that. So highly recommend that. And I think those are the four key steps that I followed when I was first starting to write. So those are what I would recommend: research, niche, edit.
Thanks for those tips. So the next question is like, especially when we are reading the content on a web page, right? When people have to scan the content, like, because these days not many people actually read, they just scan the content, right?
Yeah.
So from an end user perspective, usually instead of writing like, really long paragraph, if we can just do like an unordered list of content, it feels like, from an end user perspective, it might be better to just have unordered list of things instead of just writing like everything in huge paragraph. So as a content writer, and a copywriter, right, what are your views on like having huge paragraph versus like breaking it down into smaller paragraphs or unordered lists?
You are completely right. You should break it down. My general rule is for paragraphs to be 3 to 5 sentences long and no longer than that, because you are correct. You see a block of text, you don't necessarily always want to read it if you're not really into wanting to know what the article is saying. So as a content writer, it's easy when you're in school and writing long essays and they love big paragraphs. But like you said, once you become a reader outside of that, you don't digest big chunks of text. So I would highly recommend breaking up paragraphs so as to not take away from that. You want to be able to digest. You want your reader to be able to digest. That's my favorite word for this. So definitely break it down. That's going to be your best bet in keeping people's eyes on your article, blog, whatever it is.
Okay, thanks for that tip. So the next question is like, when we are writing a blog versus writing a landing page, right? What are the things that we have to do differently between writing a blog post versus like writing a landing page?
So for landing pages, you are wanting to grab the attention immediately. For that, I would say you want to probably, if you have the ability, I would say use your bold, your italicize, your underline, which sounds kind of elementary, but people are drawn to the things that don't look the same. So if you write a statement, and this is true if you have a paragraph of text like we were talking about earlier, bold something, someone's eye immediately drawn to that part of it. So with a landing page, I would recommend that you do that more often there than in actual blogs. You also want to use power words, as I like to call them: create, led the charge, that kind of thing, because those are sort of calls to action in their own way, I should say. So always make sure you're leading with the most important text too on a landing page. Those are my recommendations. Those are my top 3.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that. So the next question is like, when we write copy, we are doing like a lot of research. Um, but okay, so the question is like, when somebody is actually writing the content, right? So they do like a lot of research and think from an end user or a reader's perspective, and then prepare the content. But when they actually are submitting it to the stakeholders, right? Sometimes the stakeholders are not convinced. on the content, right? Mostly because of personal biases and other things. I mean, because like, if we are doing something, this is because this is something which is very subjective, right? So maybe like if there is a piece of content, I could feel like this is something that would be beneficial to the user, but somebody's view on it would be completely different because it is very subjective, and it is very
Right.
difficult to say who's correct and things like that, right?
Right.
So in those cases, especially as a writer, it kind of sometimes it might feel like the writer's freedom is actually getting taken away, because now you have to edit the content based on how the stakeholder wants it to be. So as somebody who would have probably gone through this, like, how do you cope up with those kind of things?
So I will admit to it, I do not have the thickest skin. So sometimes I'll get responses and be like, oh no, was it really that bad? That's not how it is. So the first thing you have to do is remove yourself from the personal feelings. They're not attacking you as a writer. They're not taking away any creative freedom necessarily. They're looking at it as, what does the company need in order to maintain its worth and increase its worth? And so as a copywriter, you have to learn how to take that criticism and know that it's for the greater good. It's hard because writers put so much into what they produce, and then for someone to say, this isn't what we want, it can be hard for sure. But I think the most important thing is to acknowledge that your job is to add value to the company, and by editing your work, you're not losing a sense of control or a sense of ownership over your work. You're doing it to help out the company and the stakeholders. So you can't take it personally. It strictly has to do with the success.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a nice way to put it, right? Because I think this also probably applies to everybody, even like we developers sometimes get those kind of feedback, like, when somebody reviews our code or something like that. And usually, I think it's always better to separate yourself, like your personal feelings, from the work that you have created, because people, like, whenever you receive feedback, it's good to think that the feedback is for the work and not for you personally. I think that mindset helps a lot, especially to keep our sanity and mental health, I guess.
No,
And
you're completely right. It's applicable to every single person. Everyone is going, no matter what your role, you're going to receive constructive criticism or you're going to receive changes. And like you said, you just have to learn how to not take it personally and realize it's for the company rather than yourself.
yep, that's correct. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure that I have read all the questions that have come from chat. So meanwhile, people who have been listening to the talk, like, if you have any more questions, please post them in chat.
This was so much fun. You guys are such good listeners. No, but I do want to say, now that there are more people here, it's been such a privilege to speak with you and tell my story to you. Honestly, it means the world that you came and listened and asked questions. It makes me very happy, and it's nice. Like I said, it feels like my work is coming to fruition by sitting here and speaking with you.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think, as I said in the beginning, right, it's our privilege, because it's always good to, listen from people who are actually from a completely different, or basically, like, to get a different perspective on things, right? Because we usually have mostly, like, as I said, technical talks. So I think, like, we thought this time it would be nice to have a talk that is slightly non-technical, but at the same time it would be like somewhat relevant to the people who attend these meetups. Because as I said initially, like, most of us are developers, like the technical people, and sometimes, like, there are also like a lot of bloggers and content creators who join these meetings. So we thought, like, we could have like a topic which would benefit everybody, but at the same time, like, kind of get a different perspective. I think, like, it was really nice, and thanks so much again for taking time and staying late on a Friday night and sharing all your experience and giving us tips about content writing. as I said, like, yep. Thank you very much for doing that, and I do hope that we would have more sessions, and possibly, like, at a later point in time we could think of doing a session which could be like more geared towards what developers can think about, like, doing content writing and things like that.
Definitely. It was so funny when I was reached out to, I was like, I don't know how to use I use WordPress, but I don't know how to use it that well. Like, no, it's fine. We want you to talk about what you're actually good at. So it truly is such an honor, and you are so kind to have me, and I'm very appreciative of it and of you for giving me your time.
Yep. As I said, thank you very much for doing this.